Just before we get started, right, I just wanted to tell you that I've got a new series that's now available called Truth Seeking. That's TROOF. There's a link to it in the link tree below. It's me and a comedian from the UK called Jimmy Bud just discussing various conspiracy theories. We'd love to know what you think about it. We'd love to know that there's people listening. You alright, guys? I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Fresh Old FM. And this week, we're thinking about people like Tupac, Biggie Smalls, Michael Jackson, Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain. Just so you know, it's not a race thing. JFK and whoever else might spring to mind. Because this week, I thought we could explore whether or not any of those people were actually real people. So let's have a song to start us off. This is Rain Song by Lunacy and Mash from the new Chaos Theory Volume 1 album. A lot of people seem to believe in this 27 Club, innit, which is a very, very special club. A little bit stricter than, sort of No Girls Allowed. A group that, unfortunately, none of the members ever made it to the 27 Club. But instead of being gender-specific, like a treehouse, it's actually very, very age-specific. You got to die whilst you're 27 in order to get your invite, which are obviously always sent posthumously, which makes it less of a club and more just like a weird collection of people from an unknown man or woman, or makes for an even weirder man or woman just waiting at a door for an RSPV that's never going to come back. There are people though like Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, and Amy Winehouse. Now people believe that these people they seem to have huge careers in it for a very short time, and they're still known now that everyone knows those names in it. Got Jimi Hendrix for his playing guitar behind his head, Jim Morrison for I think wiggling his dick round on the stage while he was with the Doors, and Amy Winehouse for being just like cracked out and that. Now I guess part of this, a big career, short time, it could be where we've got we've got the saying to explain that away. The candle that burns twice as bright lasts half as long. But that candle was made somewhere in it, and it was probably fitted with a wick that would make it burn twice as fast, possibly made with a fuse or a newer type of wax. So if that's the case, who's making these people that die young? Or maybe, more importantly, who's making these people die? Now, that's what the 27 Clubbers think. And it's a good thing to ponder, innit? Because, what about if they're not actually dying? What if they're able to somehow fully actualise, or whatever it is a hippie would call it, and they're able to take a trip across the sea to the door, like Truman did in the Truman Show? Now, to fully actualise, maybe it's maybe it'd be a bit like what Bonnie Nettles and Michael Applewhite, the guy from Heaven's Gate cult. Maybe it's what they think. You kill, you die, and then you get sucked into a spaceship as and when it goes past. Maybe it's a bit like that. I don't know. But the only indications we have of a land existing beyond what we know are the beliefs that are held by flat earthers. They believe that we're trapped inside some form of ice wall or under a dome, or on a form of, I imagine like a never-ending table full of little holes, and then, inside these holes is different realities. And then we've got the stories of Lemuria, which we've learnt about in the past, Atlantis, which we've touched on, and other lost continents as well, Now, some people, like myself, I believe that we just decided, that'll do, that'll do, pig, that'll do. We're making atlases and maps, because in the real world and outside of pub quizzes, there's very little need to know about other continents or islands or countries. Think about how much money, right, schools would have to fork out to retrain the geography departments and restocking the world maps with new finds every 6 months from these explorers getting about and finding things. Might as well do a little cheeky advert, innit, because no one's paying me to fucking advertise on this yet. So, mystery boxes, mate. Mystery boxes are on my website at 30 quid a pop. Got some hairy danglers which are made out of rat skin and that. They're a tenner. You can pop them on the rear view mirror of your car. Got crystals, rocks, geodes, fossils, loads of stuff, mate. Even pairs of mouse testicles, chick hearts, kidneys, key rings, mate, at 3 quid a pop. Come and have a look, worldaroundyou.com. And now I'll let you get back on with the show. Then you've got the scientists, right, that tell us that other islands do exist. But that they're massive, right? And instead of floating on top of oceans, they actually float in nothingness whilst hurtling towards and away from each other at thousands of miles an hour, all while spinning at extreme speeds, while spending the first half of their lives trying to run away from a constantly exploding ball of nuclear bombs until their invisible legs get tired or the intergalactic elastic reaches its maximum stretch and snaps back on itself, sending a rock flinging back towards a possibly now imploding star, which in itself will probably become a tube through nothingness that leads to another random point of nothingness in what scientists deem a black hole or a wormhole. Now, we don't learn about all the planets to discover, right, do we? We don't do that in school. We don't learn about that. I mean, most people aren't even sure if Pluto is or isn't a planet anymore, and even fewer people are aware of the existence of the extra planet in our solar system under the name of Nibiru or Planet X that supposedly causes all of the cataclysmic events on our planet. We do know of another place though that we can only make speculation about it, and it's where Ghislaine Maxwell comes from. Now, she claimed to be a citizen of a place that I think she called Terra Mar, going off the top of my head. It was something along those lines, Terra something. It definitely wasn't Terra Firma. Terra May. I don't know, May makes sense. Terra May, because May sounds like something to do with water. I remember a May, something to do with water. Could be Terra May. Anyway, it's basically the uncharted seas and oceans. Now, if it's uncharted, then surely there's going to be more islands and land masses out there. And when we look at other planets, right, like Mars, we see solid ground in it. We don't see seas, we don't see water, we don't see fucking seas of mercury, floating around, burning the ground, and sulphur, like in hell. So it seems very unlikely that we would have this much water that we're told we have on Earth. Now, I think it might have been overplayed, right, in order to freak us out and stop us from exploring or from finding the equivalent of the painted walls at the end of the oceans. So there's a few more questions. What's beyond these walls? Whether they're MDF or ice, it don't matter, innit? I don't think that matters at all. Another question, though, is who was all of this constructed for? This weird little prison, this life sentence, who was it made for? Was the world as we know it constructed for the sake of one guy? I'd argue, personally, that it was created for a woman, because lots of TV and products seem to be aimed at women and adverts, Even though society tells us it's a man's world, quote-unquote, and that men are at the centre of focus, I think there's a chance that's been put out there, right, to try and trick the one lady of this world who it's all centred around, right? It's all aimed at tricking her, so they've made her believe that it's all aimed at men. So that, she never thinks to herself that the world is, in essence, hers. And it would be a really nice time here to play The World Is Yours by Nas, but I don't think we're going to have time because we've got a lot to cover. But I do recommend the song, so if you want to add that to your little list, obviously you've all heard it, but pause the show, listen to that, come back, I don't care. They're being tricked in that. That's not to say that I think women are easier to trick than men. In all honesty, I think men and women are both very difficult to trick, and if you were ever going to trick someone, then it should be a child, or a frail and quite possibly delirious old person, so maybe that's who the world is invented for. Maybe the world is invented for children and old people. Maybe that's why Epstein and Maxwell were nicked for child sex stuff, Maybe Ghislaine was like the woman that sneaks into the Truman Show to try and tell Truman that none of this is real, but instead of coming and trying to have a flirt with us, maybe they're trying to show us that the big they, the they that have created the known world, are always filming the children, your children, regardless of their age or gender or their current activity, whether they're old people, young people, babies, adults, they're always filming them. They are always watching, right? There is always someone watching your children, and you can never keep them safe from the all-seeing eye. But because the big they are also the known media, they make these people look evil and more literal. But if Giswell really isn't from France or England, and is in fact from Terra Mar, then surely there's got to be more people out there, innit? And that begs the question, are we the ones on the outside, or are they? Now, I'd argue they're on the inside, because surely if there were more people beyond the seas and we were the ones on the inside, then surely they'd always be appearing, trying to cause disruption, trying to get in, trying to break the walls. maybe that's why certain people become famous. They climb into our reality, people like Tupac, and then they are, constantly observed. And to make it seem normal, they put it all over TV until they can then catch them and maybe kill them from our perspective, and then chuck them back over the wall. Or perhaps until they can evict the ethereal being out of its meat shell and cast them back into the other realm. Possibly. There's a lot of scope in this, to be honest, guys. A lot of scope. Now let's have a song. This is by The Elevators, G Love and Special Sauce with Brother Ali. This is a new song called Delorean. If you're enjoying this, mate, don't forget to give us a review and not on Apple if you can. Otherwise, send it to... If everybody who's listening sent it to a couple of mates, right? I might be able to get towards getting paid to make these for adverts and that. Otherwise, no worries if not. There's people giving money on the Patreon, which is a link to that in the below as well. The money from that goes towards hosting this and hosting Truth Seeking. Give Truth Seeking a listen as well. There'll be a link to that below possibly. Otherwise, just have a look in my Linktree link. So, if this whole world was made, right, for a single person, then who are they? And where are they? I'd argue they've got no evidence that this whole world is theirs, so they're not listening to this show, they're not hearing this, and if they are, they're not thinking it's about them. But it could be right about you, it could be about you. I would argue they don't even know it's a possibility, until now. I reckon that they're so swept up in their average humdrum day-to-day life that they don't even realise it, they don't even recognise it as a possibility. The bigger question here is, are we all real? Do we exist? Are the other people that interact with them, are they the real people who interact with the person this prison was built for? Or were we all real people, right, who signed up for this job, but by passing through, I don't know, something like what we learnt about last week with the Greys and how they made hypnotic fields around all of the earth. Maybe we've all forgotten that we're supposed to be working in shift patterns to cover the time, and we've all forgotten where the doors are. Now the Greys would know this because the Greys love to lie to us. So maybe we're being tricked into entering this fake world under the premise of, you'll get somewhere to live so long as you stick to the rules, and you've got a job, and we'll pay you to your family outside and that. Now it's hard to know, because obviously because of the hypnotic fields and the mind manipulation tactics in place by the Greys, none of us would ever remember. And some people might say, right, it makes more sense for the person who this would all be constructed for to be in a position of authority, like, for example, the Queen of England or the head of a big business. Maybe it's not one person, no. Maybe it was made for a small number of people, proportionally, to the rest of the population. Maybe that's why some people are successful, because, it would be too obvious if that person failed repeatedly like everyone else. Or is it that there are simply different characters being played, each with different personalities, traits and skills? Maybe that's where Tupac and Amy Winehouse come from, because Tupac apparently went to a pretty good school, and Amy Winehouse apparently went to some proper posh performance school in London with Billy Piper. So it would make sense that these so-called quote-unquote schools are so difficult for kids to get into, Maybe the criteria for it require you to have, I don't know, like a certain birthmark or a certain mark in your eye, certain hair colour, certain, I don't know, a certain something, something like that. I don't know what else it could be, like a birthmark, a scar, genetic makeup, genetic code, blood type, possibly, I don't know. Maybe it's that these schools are for the self-aware ethereal entities that have taken over some people and been able to access the higher stats, if you like, in their new flesh suits. Maybe instead of assigning an even spread across the board, like when they designed the little flesh suit and what the character's going to be like, they've decided to just max out charisma and look and left the others to develop naturally. Which could also explain why a lot of the people we've spoke about, realistically, apart from Elvis, are so skinny. You got Jimi Hendrix, pretty skinny. Kurt Cobain, very skinny. Amy Winehouse, very skinny. Tupac, very skinny. Biggie Smalls wasn't skinny, but part of the name in it. Maybe that was to throw us off, and it's involved in his name as well. So I don't know. Maybe he was skinny in a sort of in a flesh suit, like what Michael Jackson used to wear with his mother when he was a kid, when he used to go around evangelizing for religion, for his mum's religion. It's not out of the realms of possibility. Michael Jackson, though, he was pretty skinny. Barbara Windsor, she was pretty skinny. George Michael, pretty skinny. Do you know what I mean, though? They're all quite skinny. Now, there might be other reasons for why these people were skinny, I don't know, but, they didn't put, as I say, they didn't put any points when they were making the character into strength, or perception as such. They just charisma and look. Maybe, though, these people are inhabited by these creatures, or they're simply drones of some sort. Like, how we learned last week, again, these link together, guys. They link together. A robot made in order to bring change into the world. Now, I'd argue that if these were robots, then they're made by those trying to get through into this inside world, so made by the outsiders, if you like, not by the insiders. Maybe, right, outside of this world, what we know as the world, they've got technology to be able to do just that, whereas in here it's a lot harder because it would be difficult for the writers, or the script writers, if you like, to be able to predict the technology of the times accurately for the people observing from the outside. Like how in the Truman Show, when you watch that, it could easily be, Truman could easily be living in the 70s, he could easily be living in the mid to late 90s. But what if these so-called characters, we could call them quest setters, if you like, Kurt Cobain, Biggie Smalls, John Lennon, George Michael and Elvis, it could be argued that the huge success of these people allowed them or their affiliates to introduce new ideas to the masses, or at least to make people aware of a new way of thinking. Now, a recent example could be Caroline Flack, a woman that unfortunately took her own life. And I'm not going to take the piss, like Kurt Cobain, except people don't seem to compare the two, which is odd. I know they weren't on the same level of size, popularity-wise, but anyway, Caroline was responsible for that whole Be Kind movement on social media. That's what I remember from it. I think she was responsible for it again posthumously after she died. But now that may or may not have been a way for social media corporations to start censoring more material on their sites, all under the guise of being kind. John Lennon wanted to create a big change in the world, and he was shot by a random person in the street, but he still had huge effects in the world. Caroline Flack was also a part of this massive TV show called Love Island, which for some reason is a popular TV show all around the world, which I would argue it was made to be famous and more popular than it deserved to be, because of all the worries in society about polyamorous relationships and the amount of young people that weren't having kids, and the alleged drop-off in marriage in recent years as well. It seems like that TV show is just a way to try and make relationships cool again, if you like. Another way to social engineer, drop the little seeds, Now, another social engineering mechanism is through music. If you can get people singing a song, I think we've spoken on this before, they'll start to believe it because they're becoming more and more used to hearing those words coming out of their own mouths in their own dialect, normalising new ideas, right? Maybe each of these beloved people, maybe they died in our eyes but didn't really die. Maybe they pretend that they've died and then they get recast or something, put into a new body, or just get facial surgery from the place outside of the wall, which has got the much more advanced technology. George Michael, he's another dead guy, but so is David Carradine. And I would say that both of these people reached a point in their current careers where they couldn't really be useful anymore, so they made a big thing about them dying. And then they take them out of this world, or this walled-off version of the world, into a place where time maybe acts differently, like in space. Apparently in space, time acts differently upon your body because your blood's not succumbed to gravity and that, so you can age differently, things like that. And they're forward in time or back in time in the ISS, is it? The thing that fucking floats around the Earth. Now, and in that new place, obviously, it would be a big thing for David Carradine. Strangulation no longer kills a man. And what about that spy as well that was found dead in a suitcase? That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it? Well, what if the so-called spy was just a regular person, like a stagehand from this exterior world that tried to make people aware in this world that this world isn't real? Again, a lot like when they would have people come into the town-sized studio in the Truman Show. What we've got to look out for, right, as people, is we've got to look out for people that die and then come back to life. Or people that we thought were dead and then somehow make a return. People like Nelson Mandela, a man that we all agree brought about great change to the world, but half of us agree he died in the late 80s or so, and the other half believe he went to prison. Hence the Mandela effect. And I would argue, right, that Peter Kay may be involved in all of this as well, because he did a song about Nelson Mandela in that Pop Idol piss take years ago, and he dressed up as a woman for it and kept up the charade then for a while. Again, possibly readying or at least sowing the seeds, right, for societal change by introducing a large amount of people to the normalisation of people displaying a different gender to what their groin dictates. A subject that until that time had usually been the butt of jokes, but in this TV show it wasn't funny that he was a woman. That wasn't part of the joke or the punchline ever. It was just a woman called Geraldine who was obviously a man in drag. Now, I'd argue it added nothing at all to it, and the best jokes of the entire show were the quartet with the two wheelchair users called Two Up, Two Down, and that lad that was called R. Kelly, who was just a lad called Kelly, who all of his family referred to as that's R. Kelly, that. Now, Peter Kay isn't dead yet, but he did have a big tour arranged, a lot like a possible namesake, Michael Jackson. Now, I'm not saying Peter Kay and Michael Jackson are the same guy. I'm not saying that. I think it might be like a football team's worth of people that play these characters, possibly. According to some conspiracy theorists, that seems to be what people seem to believe. But Peter Kay's tour got cancelled for reasons that we don't know, or we didn't know at the time. A lot like Michael Jackson's tour, right? So there's little connections there. There is one character in life, though, and I can't understand how she fits into it all. I'm struggling. And that, as I did mention her earlier on in the show, that's Barbara Windsor. Now, I know she whipped her tits out a bit when she was younger for Carry On and all that, and maybe that was to help teach people about tits back in the day, a feature in a body that up until that point had remained hidden from the world. Unfortunately, now, we never got a TV series where, like the Queen gets cloned and is forced to live in the East End of London and simultaneously in a trailer park in the southern states of America. Now, that's probably the only thing that is actually keeping Dolly Parton alive. But once they introduce cloning to the masses and this becomes a known thing, you can say, bye-bye to Dolly Parton. Because why else would they have called the first cloned sheep Dolly if that wasn't their intentions? Little seeds, guys, little hints and things like that in the world constantly. Let's have a song. This is Don't Trip by The Game, Ice Cube, Dre and will.i.am. Now, I know what you're thinking, and that's probably that the entire world isn't scripted. But if it isn't scripted, right, and people aren't assigned roles, then why are people like Ricky Gervais ever on Sesame Street? Like, I know we had Flanimals, right? But the kids don't need to know who the author is. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all unless you're trying to indoctrinate those children or to make children respond to the cues of certain people. For example, right, I'm trying to give you a bit of context. There could be a child, right, or a bunch of children that saw Ricky on Sesame Street years ago who later grew up to see Derek on telly with Ricky Gervais, and it's written by Ricky Gervais. I remember him from when I was a kid. And now, those people that watch Derek watch that because Ricky Gervais was responsible for it. And they're now training as a carer. I'm not saying that all of these things have bad connotations. I'm just saying I think this is how they control the world. And that would be, that them all becoming a carer would be just in time for what's been currently going on in the news for the past year, saying that there isn't enough carers to go around. You see, it's all meticulously planned, guys. What if, though, one of the people I mentioned was actually a real person, not one of these ethereal entities using a meat suit or whatever you want to call them, or an actor, a life actor? I put it out there today to you, dear listener, that John Lennon was a real person, an actual human being. And the whole reason Michael Jackson made a comeback was to be able to get the money from his fake death from the insurance for his tour, to be able to cover the licensing expenses for all of the Beatles' music into the future, to make sure that the music from the Beatles, which was in the 60s, right, and Lennon, big in the 60s, big free love movement in the 60s, loads of counterculture in the 60s, the Beatles were huge at the time, right? So to stop the music from the Beatles and Lennon specifically, so it can't reach new generations and teach people the message that was coming from an actual human being. Now, this theory that I've got here, this is kind of my own theory, this bit. This gains a little bit of traction when you're aware of Willie Campbell, right? The man that they replaced Paul McCartney with in 1966 upon Paul McCartney's death. Paul, right, was difficult to control initially, but the big they found it a lot easier to handle Willie in the late 60s. And by destroying and dismantling the Beatles, they kept Mr. Campbell in a position that would allow them to influence the rest of the world. By introducing the world to what I remember as a mental vegetarian, maybe to turn people against vegetarianism, possibly, in what could be a twist of irony, the imposter, Willie, was partly responsible for introducing fake sausage to the world. In that meat-free range that is, I think it was his wife at the time. Now, another little indicator that Paul could be dead is that episode where Paul McCartney, aka Willie Campbell, was in The Simpsons, and Lisa, to access him, to get to Paul, had to go through a freezer in order to find him. That's literally another Simpsons and the real world thing. That's a Simpsons giving a nod to the real world, because the people that get replaced are on the other side of the ice wall, or in this case, the icy door, which led to a very idyllic looking, almost Garden of Eden sort of world in a roof terrace, which you could interpret, if you wanted to, as a higher plane or a higher place of existence, because they were living on the roof of a Pooh's Quickie Mart. Now, if you're listening to this and you're wondering if you're one of the main characters or so-called natural people that aren't in on the script, then you should ask yourself a little question or two. For starters, is there anyone that keeps coming back into your life? Maybe an old friend, an old lover, a wayward family member that's been gone for years, but has made a return, possibly, to instill a very emotional reaction when you're about to make a big decision, or something life-altering is about to happen for you that you've put into motion. Talking you out of whatever that is, making you carry on with your life just as it was, except with this other person now around you occasionally. It's a good question, isn't it? I'll have a little think on that. Another question is, who is the friend, or the family member, I guess, that's always trying to stop you from doing stuff or talking you down? Maybe that's why your whole friendship group is always putting each other down. They all signed up to be a part of this world and made the agreement to play the derogatory character, but now they've forgotten, due to the Greys' mind melters in the sky and maybe in skyscrapers and stuff and the things outside fast food restaurants, that they're all stuck in a loop of repeating jokes and insults until they all end up having kids who are then stuck in this fake world because of the so-called, what we call, quote-unquote birth certificate that the parents sign, which in this fake world is probably nothing more than a bill of ownership, and you sign your name and your partner's name, or your partner comes and signs their own name if they're an active parent in the relationship, and then the big they work out what they can use your future child for. That's why you also put down your employment on the certificate too, because they can use their advanced prediction technology, if you like, that they've got access to either in the moon or outside the wall. If you know, maybe the moon is how they observing. That's what the Truman Show was getting at. I'm not sure. I don't want to use the Truman Show for reference, just to help you understand the idea. But they use this technology to kind of estimate your total future usage to the world. Now, that could be why some kids are smarter than others, or why some kids on the same street get accepted into different schools. They, the big they, have already decided which kids will go to university a few days after they've been born and these things have been signed, or however long it takes for them to get processed. You know, it could be a couple of years, and that's why they don't go to school till they're 4. But the technology in this world's getting better, so they're like, right, we can put them into school now at 3, because the prediction technology, we can use better prediction technology and get them into school at 3, and then eventually they'll be getting put into school at 6 months old, because the prediction technology in, say, like 200 years' time is now equivalent to what it is on the outside of the world right now, but it will take 200 years in the inside of the world to be able to use that prediction technology on the inside world without people getting suspicious. But they've also determined, right, what results these kids are going to get on tests, and that's why coursework now exists, and that's a big thing at schools and college. It's so that they can make the marks that need to happen for the kid actually happen, so the kid can do the tests. People can be like, oh, you know, he didn't do very well on the test, but we've already got him set. He's going to be a doctor on telly in 20 years' time. You know, he's going to be the next Dr. Hillary, you know, trying to sell curtains and not on GMTV Live. So we're going to have him on there. But we need to give him coursework, give him better marks in his coursework, so he gets the marks he needs to get there. And that's how your kids actually get the grades they get to. If they were born in this world and you've signed over their life by signing the birth certificate, right? But that will then allow that child to go on to be in the position, right, that they need to be in this predetermined day to enact the next part of the plan, a constantly ever evolving, ever changing plan. But who's always trying to stop you from doing stuff that would be productive? There's another question for you, the listener. So is it your mum? Is it your dad? A brother? A cousin? Is it your sister? Is it the local priest? Maybe it's a teacher or just a bloke down the pub that you don't really know, but he's always there when you drink, putting you down. Now that's for you to work out. I could never help you with this. I'm just giving you some tools. It's up to you to figure out if they're the right tool for the job. Like, you don't go to like its.com or fucking Screwfix or whatever and buy a load of like chisels and expect them to show you how to use the chisels. I'm just giving you the tools. You know what I mean? Now, what if the world as we know it, the one we're trapped in, is nothing more than a farm? Maybe, as ufologists suggest, we are being farmed for our negative emotions. Maybe we're being farmed for our meat. Maybe we're being farmed for our placenta at the point of birth, because you don't get to keep that. Not many people keep that, but now they're trying to make people keep that and put it in picture frames and that. Placenta, right, is that thing that, when you're born, it's that thing that celebrities apparently eat to keep themselves relevant for a couple more months in popular culture and in magazines. But the more placenta that gets eaten, the more the world seems to change for the worse. So maybe it is placenta that we're being farmed for. But as I've mentioned before in these shows and on Truth Seeking, and if you've ever sat down with me in a pub or a cafe, I think we're farmed for our shit and piss. Literally our excrement and excretions. Because I fail to believe it's just coincidence that our bodies are almost perfectly attuned for digesting food. Now, we destroy and react with most of the chemicals we ingest, right, in the food, except for gold. Gold passes straight through, completely unaffected. So, what if we are the creation of some form of higher intelligence? What if we are the Greys, the robotic clones made in order to mine the gold? We look back at history, right? And we see Enki and Enlil having the slave race, right? Making a slave race to mine gold. And, we imagine massive brutes like the... what were the giants called? Not the Anunnaki. Enki and Enlil were the Anunnaki. The Nephilim were the giants. We imagine them in it, massive brutish people, humanoids, that could dig for days on end to remove the gold from the world. But what if it's possible to create gold from almost anything, so long as you have the technology? What if we, humans, or what we deem to be humans, what if each of us are a philosopher's stone, allowing our owners, the big alchemist in the sky, to accrue gold in unfathomable amounts, mate? Maybe the big they they're above the reptilian overlords, as we thought last week, that maybe the stories of crocodiles living in the sewers could be a way to keep kids in America out of the sewers so that they don't actually see the Draco race aliens gorging themselves on human excrement and teary tissues. What if the Dracos are just another part of this, and the Dracos were made to help further filter out the gold particles from human shit? Now, I don't know the biology of a Draco because I'm not a biologist, I'm not a scientist, but I would guess that they're going to have different, at least slightly different acids in their stomachs to us, meaning that they could potentially be used to further distill. Is distill the right word? It's not a liquid, is it? Don't know what a word would be. Filter the gold into a more usable form or a bigger block, and it could be where we coined the term shit a brick, because that means something was surprising. It made you jump. And it would be surprising to see a bunch of 7-foot reptilian humanoid creatures chomping down on bits of poo in the sewers. But the original people saw themselves, they saw these reptilians shit a brick of gold out. Now then, through decades of Chinese whispers, changed the story, lost the story entirely, and became the saying that we all know today. But it gets deeper than that, guys. Have you ever heard the story of the goose that laid the golden egg? We've recently learned, right, that birds, the whole world has recently learned that birds are nothing more than recent dinosaurs, especially poultry. Chickens are supposed to be very close to dinosaurs, so a goose, waterfowl, kind of poultry, still poultry. We sell it as poultry. It's got to be close. They're the most recent dinosaurs, and dinosaurs, in most people's eyes, right, were big lizards. But we know that they might not have actually existed, and that they're a Chinese manufactured product, at least the fossils. But what else are big lizards? Fucking Dracos, mate. But the winged variety, right, they're said to be even bigger. Geese have wings, and they're kind of dinosaur-like with those, serrated beaks and long necks. But what if that's just another classic example of the big they muddying the waters like an over-enigmatic goose? Using semantics and language to tie us all into knots, to trick us, to make us believe that birds come from dinosaurs and that dinosaurs even existed, but really they're just aliens that used to live here and still live here, just kept enslaved in our sewage systems. Maybe we were aware of this though at some point, maybe when one of the towers that emit the brainwashing signals from the Greys was destroyed, and we, for some reason, started to remember that giant lizards birthed chunks of gold. But as the signal got mixed, and we still remembered the gold laying, but it got filtered through modern indoctrination and modern science, if you like, the thing that melts our minds. And now we believe that geese were responsible for the gold because geese lay eggs. Lizards do lay eggs, but we wouldn't consider lizards to be laying eggs and it'd be beneficial. But a bird laying a golden egg, that's very beneficial, whereas a giant humanoid lizard creature laying eggs wouldn't be beneficial. So the mind-melting power of the Greys, if you know what I mean. So it goes through it passes through our heads and changes the words that comes out. So we go to say something, but yous all hear something else, if that makes sense. Either way, though, I reckon that we're being used for something. It makes little to no sense to have someone collect all of our shit and piss and to not do something with it in it, just having it all fucking lying there. Because grass cuttings, right, they go in the green bin and they get turned into compost. Glass bottles get broken up and then they get turned into glass things. And paper gets recycled in order to be used for products for people who need they feel a need to virtue signal, and they can afford to do so. Because, if you're going to buy, I had some flyers printed recently for worldaroundyou.com, and I thought, I'll get the recycled paper, that'll be cheaper because the paper's recycled. 3 times the amount costs, nearly 3 times the amount, so I don't know who that's beneficial for. That's just so you can say, I use recycled materials, and that's probably why everywhere that sells recycled things charges more, because they're being charged more for it, so how is that any good for anybody? But where's all of our shit go? What are they using it for? Do they keep it all? Or do they just take what they need and then destroy it? The what bits they don't need. So they take out what's got the most gold in and then they destroy the rest of it in vats of acid or big fires so that we can't search through the piles of steaming excrement to figure out what's now missing. Unfortunately, guys, we may never know exactly what's going on at these so-called sewage works. What if, though, the thing we're actually being farmed for is positive emotions? It could easily be argued that there is a collective of humans that do everything they can to keep us as miserable as possible, people that stop us from achieving our dreams. It can also be argued that there are people who are trying to make us happier and to clean our world. What if the people trying to control climate change are the villains, though? Trying to cleanse the air that protects us, keeping us dirty and infested or infected with chemicals, just like how vegans like to try and make us eat vegetables and not eat meat. Cows and sheep don't eat meat, and they taste fucking amazing meat, whereas I reckon a dog or a lion, they're going to taste pretty shit, innit? So maybe the vegans are the next brand of brainwashing, trying to trick all of your children into eating nothing but beans and lettuces so that they have nice, clean blood and good-tasting meat for when the harvesters return. Or for when the next collector comes from the other side. Maybe that's why these people in the 27 Club die young, die far too young. It's not that they're faking their death so that they can enjoy the wealth or because they've run out of things to say. Maybe it's because they're happy. They're actually fully happy. They've done what they wanted, and maybe the aliens actually feed off of that happiness, like at the end of Monsters, Inc. Then they take that person who's completely fulfilled and they devour them. Or because they're now really rich and popular, they literally suck the life force from them. Like that woman that hangs around the back of the smoking area in most of Wetherspoons you go to. Now, I think it's much more likely, though, that these so-called life actors like JFK, Elvis, Tupac and Ronnie Barker are actually that, just actors. I mean, think about it. They show us it happening in films all of the time, right? Literally all the time in every film and TV show you watch. The big they love to hide everything under our noses. So what if we're looking too deeply into films for meaning? Maybe the storylines and plots are just there to confuse us. Maybe someone's trying to show us how one person can actually be lots of different people. Think about Johnny Depp, right? He's been loads of different people, but they're all still Johnny Depp. Jim Carrey's another. Jim Carrey's been loads of different people, loads of different characters in films, and that Morgan Freeman, Robbie Williams, Will Smith, Willem Dafoe, all of them, right? All of them are actors. All of them showing us that one person could be multiple people in lots of different films, or roles, as the professionals would like to call them. Many of us will never ever see most of these influential people in the real world. We'll only ever see them through a TV screen. So who's to say that they're not all played by the same group of 10 or 12 people, cycling through different costumes and voice modulators and disguises, doing anything they can to keep the charade up for a few days longer? 7 billion people in the world, guys. But there was only about 600 people at my school as a teenager, and there aren't that many schools around, really, if you think about it, are there? So if all of these people are constantly breeding, then where are all the kids? Think about it, guys, just for a minute before we end. Like I said, I can only give you the tools. You're going to have to figure out how to use them for yourselves. But 7 billion people, probably more than that, since I've made the note, And all these people predominantly have children, and a lot of them are in England. There's like a 60 odd million people, 70 odd million people in England. Is there though? Is there really? Where are they? You don't see them, do you? They're not out and about all the time. If you had millions of people, you think they're not all just going to fucking nip to the shop. You can nip to the shop sometimes, and there's no other fucker in there. It doesn't make any sense. And I reckon that's all we've got time for this week, guys. Keep Threshold FM on, though, because we've got HDR later on. Then we've got Jimmy Budd even later on. And I'll be back with Jimmy tomorrow for Truth Seeking at 7 PM. I'll see you in a bit, guys. Thanks for listening, man. If you enjoyed the show, give it a share online, share it in your Instagram stories from Spotify. Send it to a mate. Talk about it on social media. Tweet me, mate. Tweet me. When I get 2,000 followers on Twitter, I'll be doing a taxidermy giveaway, so that's something for you, innit? That's a little something. @WorldAroundYou, same as the name of the show. I'll see you in a bit, mate.